All right, this is my calculator app. I did a project in Kotlin and Android Studios. So if the README, the whole point of this is I've never used Kotlin or Android, so I wanted to teach myself how to do it. And I thought a calculator app would be a pretty good way to start. And then I found a couple sites that were useful that taught me how to use a button and how to get an element by ID. Those are both useful. So yeah, I'll jump into it. My code for my XML is right here. Basically, an Android app is broken up into your Kotlin or whatever, or Java if you decide to use that, but I decided to use Kotlin. This is what's going to make the app do stuff. And the XML is what's going to structure the app, where the buttons are going to be, what they're going to look like, things like that. So the way I did it, you can see what it looks like on the phone here, but I added all these buttons, and in the XML, I gave all these buttons an on-click property. So what this means is when you click the button, it's going to do what push one is, and push one is a function inside of my main activity in Kotlin. So when you push this button, it's going to do whatever this function says it to do. And so if you jump into my main activity, it's kind of a mess. But basically the way I've had it work is I have right at the top, I have a sum and a sum2, which I admit could have been named better, but basically this is going to be the first number and this is the second number. So if you're doing 1 plus 2, this would be 1, this would be 2. And then down here I have some variables. The first one called which sum, so that is so I can keep track of which number the user should be changing when they're pushing buttons, number buttons. So if it's 1, then they should just be pushing, but anytime they push a number button, it will add to the first number. So for example, my number screen is very tiny. I didn't really care about making it look pretty for this assignment, but I will probably make it look prettier later. But anyways, if I push the number 1, I get 1. And since my sum is equal to 0, we're still working on number 1, or that first sum. So I can do add stuff to it. I can make the number 158. And then if I push an operator, now which sum should be equal to 2, which will mean that tells my program to start using the other sum. And so now if I push buttons, it affects this other sum. Yeah, so that's how that works. And then I have a function for a clear, which is pretty straightforward. If I hit clear, like you just saw me do, it'll set both the sums back to 0, which sum will go back to 1. So the user can just restart. And then I do this display.text thing that's just the command that displays the sum to the screen, to the text view. And then all of my buttons are the same. This is where I know I could make my code a lot more impressive if I just had one function for all the buttons, but right now every single button has its own function, and it's basically the same thing. I'm going to just set a variable for my text view so I can do stuff to my text view. And then I'm going to have an if statement because I want to know which sum I should be changing when I hit number buttons. And then I have another if else. If it's 2, I can change to the other one. And that's basically it. And then the logic is pretty simple. Just the sum, if the sum does not equal 0, then I will multiply it by 10 and then add the number of the button pressed. Just for example, I pressed 1, and because I pressed 1, the sum was equal to, well, let's see, you know what, we're on 9, so I'm going to do 9. Okay. Okay, so I pushed 9, and just like my logic says, we're on sum 1, so sum 1's being changed. And since the sum 1 does not equal 0, we're going to multiply by 10, or excuse me, it does equal 0, so we're not going to multiply by 10. We're just going to add 9. But now that we have 9 here, if I wanted to add another 9, it makes it 99. Because we don't have, because this is not equal to 0, it multiples my 9 by 10 and adds the 9. That's how that works. And it's the same for every number. So that's what my calculator does. And then I guess the only other function I haven't explained yet is the equal function, which is pretty simple. It just has a bunch of if statements. Oh, and I guess I forgot to say, I should talk about the operator, but I have on top of having a which sum, I also have a which operator, which will just tell my program what operation button was pushed. So if it's 2, that means the negative operation was pressed. If it's 4, that means the divider. Anyways, it's kind of how I keep track of that. And then equal basically just does the same thing. When equals pressed, we just need to display a value. So I get my text view, and then I just go through and find out which operator was pressed. And then I reset which sum to 1, and I set the sum 2 to 0 because we're going to display what the operation was. And we just display the sum, and that way we can keep doing stuff. So one final example, 1 plus 5 equals 6. And we're back to just the sum, the first sum. So I can do more stuff with that if I wanted. I could keep going. And that's it. That's my calculator app.